Doctor, I beg you, save him! Only you can help us!" The young woman threw herself at Philip's feet in tears and screams, but he only staggered into her inconsolable, grief-stricken eyes. Her only son, Parker, was lying unconscious in the corridor of the emergency ward at that time. He was pale, with a bandaged head, and through the bandages a thin trickle of blood was oozing. But the most frightening thing was to see the doctor's aloof looks. There was no hope. They would not have time to bring him to the city, and a helicopter would not fly here in such a storm to a remote area. But one of the nurses whispered to the boy's mother that a famous surgeon worked at their centre and that only he could help in this situation. So the woman rushed to the man in whom she saw the last hope for her child. And as he stood there with a detached and confused look, unable to hold back tears himself, but realizing that he could do nothing to help. "Please understand, I haven't operated in years. I won't be able to help you," Philip whispered doomfully. And it was the truth. About 3 years ago, an accidentally, abruptly turned his life, wiped out 12 years of hard work and the hope for a perfect future. On a windless winter morning, Philip, chief surgeon at the Department of Neurosurgery in a famous hospital, slowly walked to his car, parked around the corner of the house. The man enjoyed the frosty air, the delightful pink sunrise, and smiled happily at his thoughts. He was content, for at his 35 years he had everything one could dream of: a favourite job, prosperity, professional recognition, and most importantly, a beautiful bride, Eleanor, who had finally agreed to marry him. Thoughts of the beloved woman and the anticipation of near happiness cheered the young doctor up, and as he passed by the office building, he did not immediately hear the distinctive sound of snow falling from the roof. Head injury was miraculously avoided, but his hand was badly damaged. A huge piece of ice severed the tendon, depriving his sensitive fingers of confidence and accuracy of movement. After a course of rehabilitation in the clinic, it became clear that Philip would hardly ever be able to operate, because he could not even hold instruments in his hands. Not being able to operate, Philip did not want to stay in the clinic just a consultant, and having said goodbye to his beloved work, he moved to a remote town away from the capital, where he got a job as a general practitioner. His fiancée, Eleanor, not wanting to link their lives with an ordinary country doctor, disappeared from his life. Philip took a long time to come to his senses. He was just beginning to get used to his new life when suddenly this woman appeared in the waiting room and demanded the impossible from him. He looked at her again, not knowing why, suddenly followed her. When he saw the child, he froze in shock. The boy lay as pale as a sheet, and the blood trickling from his temple, one drop at a time, was taking the child's life. Another boy stood beside the stretcher, barely holding the leash of a huge red-haired dog that was struggling, wheezing with choking and despair, tearing toward its owner. "That's my son's dog. His name is Ollie," the woman whispered, continuing to look hopefully at Philip. The doctor shuddered and squinted for a moment, as if trying to shake off an obsession, and then shouted, "Prepare the operating room. Urgent!" As Philip, as if in a dream, prepared for surgery, the image of another dog, his father's sheepdog Tara, stood before his eyes. Once he, a 15-year-old boy, had often played ball with Tara before the terrible car accident that killed his father. He remembered the helpless eyes of the doctor, who couldn't do anything then either, and the unhappy eyes of Tara, laying for days by the fresh gravestone. And then, a week after the funeral, he found her cold body there too. At that moment, Philip promised to become the best surgeon, and now he was unbearably ashamed that he gave up so quickly and forgot the word to his father. Philip began the operation. He felt how the tools, heavy as weights, making his fingers freeze. He bit his lips to blood, trying not to notice the wild pain in the wrist from the strain, and forced himself to work faster. He understood that time was short, because in a little while the swelling of the brain could not be avoided. Cold sweat flooded his eyes, horror fogged his brain, and only a wild desire not to let death take over made him forget about fear and act further. Much later, after surgery, Philip came to his senses. Only now he realized that he had saved the child from certain death, and looking at his hands, he wept happily. This incident changed his life. Soon Philip returned to his beloved work in his native capital clinic, and all his colleagues were sincerely happy for him, and, again, anxiety-ridden parents from all over the country brought to him young patients. He was distracted from his thoughts by the voice of the head nurse. The woman reported that he had visitors and that they were waiting for him in the waiting room. Philip, having decided that another patient had arrived for consultation, put aside the documents that he had to fill out to discharge the patient and hurried to the waiting room. But when he saw who had arrived, he got worried. "Megan? Parker? Why are you here? Has something happened?" asked Philip anxiously in his voice. "No, we're fine," said Megan cheerfully, and she and Parker slyly glanced at each other. "We're here to see you on another matter." Philip was at once relieved of his heart, and he looked closely at Megan, and for the first time he noticed what beautiful eyes and a nice smile she had. He also noticed that her jacket was oddly ruffled. There was a pause, and Parker took something fluffy with huge ears out from under his mother's jacket and handed it to Philip. "Doctor, this is for you, a present," said the boy. "My dog Ollie found it somewhere and brought it to us. And then we saw your interview on TV, and Ollie and this puppy started wagging their tails and barking as soon as they heard your voice. So we thought—" Philip, barely able to tear himself away from Megan's eyes, gently stroked the puppy on its shaggy head and reverently pressed it against him. "That's right. I was just dreaming of a dog after seeing your Ollie." Philip